All right, this is the Pure Rock Show. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Started off with a couple of deep tracks, which I know most of you love. For those of you that weren't aware, just heard Night Ranger, Rumors in the Air, and kicked things off tonight with Gamma, Ready for Action, off of their debut album. And we have a special guest tonight, and a lot of you may know the common denominator between those two bands. It's pretty deep. You have to be pretty much a music nut to know this, but I know a lot of you are. But on the phone with me now, we have a guest, Tim Durling, who I had on the show several months ago to talk about his Sammy Hagar book. He's written a new one. But before we get into that, Tim, thank you for joining us. And let's see if you know what that common denominator is between those two songs I played by Gamma and Night Ranger to kick off the show.
Well, thank you for having me on again. And I'm pretty sure that the common denominator there is a guy by the name of Alan Fitzgerald, known to most of music fans as simply Fitz.
That is correct. Well done. And pretty much figured you'd know because you wrote the book. Pun intended. Alan Fitzgerald. This guy, he's not a household name, obviously, but if you're into a lot of the bands that we are, you would know he was on the second album by Montrose called Paper Money. He played bass after Bill Church was booted. He stuck with Ronnie for the next album after Sammy left, then stuck. Interestingly, he did not play on the Jump On It album, but then when Ronnie did a solo album, he was back on that playing bass, and then he joined Ronnie again on his next project, Gamma, but only for the first album. Right after that, he went back to Sammy and played some bass on Sammy's 9 out of 10 scale and Red album. And then he joined Night Ranger, and he was one of the original members of Night Ranger on all of their classic albums. And then a really interesting footnote is he became Van Halen's keyboard tech in the early 90s, throughout the mid-90s, and then even stuck with them when Dave came back. And he's credited on both Van Halen Live, Right Here, Right Now with Sammy, and the Van Halen album with Dave, Tokyo Dome, which is kind of an interesting fun fact. So if you like facts like that, you're going to love Tim's book. So, Tim, before we get into your new book, which is entitled Sing Me Away, the Night Ranger Album Review, if you could, why don't you let the listeners know about your digital presence and all the good things you have going on there and the other books you've written?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've had my YouTube channel, Tim's Vinyl Confessions, now since 2014, and it's just basically me, doing much the same as you do. We can talk about the music that we love, and especially the lesser, the unsung bands, try to get them a little bit more exposure. And an extension of that, I guess about, it's been over 4 years now, but decided to dip my toe into the world of writing books, which is not something I'd ever really aspired to do, but I've got 5 of them out there now. So my first book was a very unique, it's sort of a coffee table experience called Unspooled, an adventure in 8 tracks, and it largely chronicles the mostly unknown aspect of the record clubs, Columbia House, RCA Music Service, that continued to manufacture titles on 8-track all the way through 1988. I don't think a lot of people to this day realize that even though they stopped making 8 tracks available in stores in the early 80s, if you were signed up to these music clubs, you had that option for most major label titles all the way through 1988. And I have always been fascinated by that because that just opens up the door to so many odd titles that, existed on 4 formats. At the same time, you had CD, you had record, you had cassette, and you had the little old 8-track. So I did a book about that now. And since then, I've done 4 more books, and they've all been on individual artists or bands. So my second book, and the book that to this day is my best-selling book, is my Y&T book, nice. Down for the Count, the Y&T album review. That did really, really well for me. And then I did Kansas. I did a book on that band, Let It Be Your Guide. That's another album review. Both of those books are panel books where I've got other people weighing in with their opinions and answering a set of questions about each studio album. And then, of course, as you mentioned, my Sammy Hagar book, Red on Black. Now, that one was just me writing about all of Sammy Hagar's solo albums, and that includes... there's a chapter on Montrose, of course, there's a chapter on Van Halen, a chapter on Chicken Foot, but it's got all of his studio albums, and that, including HSAS and the Circle albums.
It's
and
very complete.
We talked about that.
Really, really enjoyed that book.
Thank you. Yeah, try to be complete on that. And the Night Ranger book is a panel book again, and it is the biggest book that I've done yet in terms of length. It's almost 300 pages, and I've got 10 panelists per studio album, and there are 13 studio albums in the Night Ranger catalog. And I don't think a lot of people realize just how many albums that they have, and they continue to release good new music. As of 4 years ago, they put new music out. So that's another band. I like to concentrate on bands that haven't had a million books done about them. And in the case of Night Ranger, I think that it's like the Y&T one. There's never been a book just on Night Ranger before. So, unless there's something I've missed, but do not know of one. So I'm very happy with how it's come out.
Yeah, it came out great. And, I would say I'm a casual fan of Night Ranger. I have their greatest hits. I've had that since I was a kid, and I bought their self-titled reunion album. That's, I know some songs on soundtracks. That's pretty much the extent of my Night Ranger, knowledge. So obviously I learned a ton reading this book. I mean, you go through every song on every album. It really is amazing. I mean, my first reaction was like, it seems like you have about 25 or 30 different people on these panels throughout the whole book. Is that about correct in total?
There's quite a few, yeah. There's at least a couple of dozen, and not everybody talks about the same albums,
yeah.
But I do have a lot of people that talk about more than one album. And to be quite honest with you, I did when I was preparing for this, I did talk to a lot of people who, like yourself, had the greatest hits, maybe had a couple of the 80s albums, and that was about it. And, there are bands that in my collection that are like that I just, I got a best of because I saw them in concert or like quite a lot of the songs, but I've never pursued them any further. And maybe someday I'll get back into that. But Night Ranger's a band I've been a fan of, probably since I was about 9 years old, and I've just always enjoyed their music. And they've really, aside from a hiatus in the 90s, they've never really stopped. And I think that since they kind of got back on a creative role at the turn of around 2011, and they're still on it. They're making really good quality albums, and I wanted to shed a light on those albums because the albums that come out on Frontiers Records and these other labels, they just don't get the exposure that they should.
Right.
I've always thought that this band had a certain amount of, there's always a certain amount of quality there, and there's always a melodic, there's always a melody, and one of the things that I always loved about this band is that generally it was usually lyrically very positive and very full of, just hopeful messages. It's the same reason that I like Triumph.
I was just going to say, similar to Triumph.
Like that.
You took the words out of my mouth. Exactly.
And there's an interesting connection there of late, but we can get into that. Just a really cool coincidence that involves both bands. But anyway, but yeah, I've just always really been a fan. And when it came time to, it's time to start another book, it was just a natural. So yeah, I'm a Night Ranger. There should be a Night Ranger book. And like a lot of them, I looked around. I didn't see any books on them. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be a book going through all of the Night Ranger albums. And it did take me a while to find people that knew those latter-day albums well enough, or at least were willing to listen to them, to, be able to answer the questions. And since then, in one of the most gratifying things for me, and the reason that I like doing these books, is when people come back to me and say, boy, since I read this book, I've checked out, some of the more recent albums. They're really good. I ordered a couple. I've been waiting on them to get here. That's fantastic. That's happened to me with the Y&T. It happened with Kansas, and it's happened with Sammy. A lot of people said I never really checked out his Capitol Records catalog, and now I've got a couple of the Rock Candy reissues coming, and so it's great. It's fantastic, and that's why I do my channel. It's shedding light on these bands, and in the case of a band like Night Ranger, it's interesting because Night Ranger are in a situation where most people know Sister Christian because that was such a huge hit. It was an iconic song. It's had several lives due to it being used in TV and movies. But the success of that song is sort of outsized compared to the band itself. And, it's not like some bands that can go out on the road and they've got 6, 7, 8 big songs.
Right.
With Night Ranger, they actually had more hit songs than people would probably know right off the top of their head. But I just think that it's such a rich catalog, and most of their albums were written with, you could have listened to them and gone, well, that could have been a single, that could have been a single. They're just great melodic rock songs. And, I think every classic band deserves to be commemorated in a book form. So this is just one of the, this is just a band that I was just waiting to get to. And I'm really glad that, I really appreciate how everybody stepped up.
How do you decide to do a panel book versus the Sammy one that was not a panel? What goes into that decision making?
Well, there are things that I like about doing both formats. I have no interest in doing a biography, and I have no interest in I'm not interested in dirt. You know what I mean? I'm interested in talking about the music. And with the panel books, I come up with a series of questions, or sometimes they're just statements. They're not always, questions. Sometimes they're just statements to be agreed or disagreed with. And I come up with a series of those for each album. And I think, let's see who could answer these, who would like to answer these. So that generates the content and it fills in the book quickly. In the case of the Sammy one, there were so many things that I myself wanted to get out that I'd been thinking for years. And one thing that I know you and I talked about was the whole thing of the truck stop tapes, because I'd never put that in words, what that experience was like when you get these record company quick fix, quick money grab things that they would put out, usually quite cheap looking, and the artist probably doesn't get a lot of money from them. And a lot of Sammy's early catalog came to me via those types of releases. Never really talked about it before. And I just wanted to talk about, I've been such a fan of his for such a long time, had such a hard time tracking down those albums. I just thought, I think I got enough in my, my little brain that I can make a book out of this.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the rest of these, the panel books, I love getting opinions from people. I love getting their thoughts and their memories of hearing some of these songs. And even if it's someone that's only been familiar with the band for the last few years, they might hear a song that I've been listening to for over 40 years and pick up on something that I'd never noticed before.
Sure.
And that happens. There's different things where I've gone, I never even made that comparison before. That never even occurred to me. So I learned stuff, and I learned new ways to appreciate the albums. Like a really good example, Night Ranger did one album in the first decade of the 2000s called Hole in the Sun. Now, if you ask a lot of diehard Night Ranger fans, that's not likely to be one that rises to a favorite.
Right.
But I actually did talk to one person who really enjoys that album, and they were very eloquent in how they expressed what it is about the album that they like. And I never thought about it that way before, so that's changed my opinion, and I've gone back and listened to it and said, okay, well, what are they hearing that I wasn't hearing? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the way the book flows for the listeners. It really is like Tim said, he'll say a statement, not really a question, but, an opinion, a statement, and then follows, 5, 10 different opinions expounding on that. And it's like, Tim's like, I feel like, I know you didn't do it like this, but it comes across as you're sitting in a room and you got 10 guys around you, you come out with your statement and you kind of all discuss stuff around it. It's really, an entertaining read. It's kind of like a book club, but going over song by song, album by album.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's exactly the goal. And I have to say that I was highly inspired, even when I went to do the Y&T book. I was inspired by a fellow Canadian, glad to say he's become a buddy of mine, Martin Popoff, who's written a ton of great rock books. And he does an album-by-album series. And that's exactly what they are. And I modeled mine after his. I just don't call them album by album because that's kind of his thing. But that's okay because it gives me a chance to say, well, I'm doing it on this band. What's the best title I can give it that links it to the band, but also gives people an idea of what it's about? And that's exactly it. You have to do some editing, and you want it to sound conversational, and you want it to sound like a bunch of people are sitting around talking, and like, all right, let's throw this around the table. Dawn Patrol starts off with blah 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 blah, and just let them go, and what people have to say about it. So
even down to
I'm glad
the
you
album.
picked up on that because
Of course, even down to the album cover art is discussed, and I like the section at the back where you talk about Brad and Jeff, the guitarists, and them being how they are as guitarists. I mean, it's so complete, your books. I really do enjoy reading them. And again, for this one, unlike the Sammy book, which I consider myself an expert on because I'm a big fan. Like I said, Night Ranger I came into knowing a lot of their songs and knowing the members really well and their side projects, but never really delved into it anywhere near as you did. So, I learned a lot, and it's all very entertaining. I mean, even your discography at the back, I never heard of most of these albums that came out. These live ones and compilations, and some of these latter ones, never saw them in my life. So it's a great guide.
Yeah, that's and like we said, that's the bane of coming out on smaller and smaller labels, that they do get forgotten. They do have a shelf life, and sometimes they're only issued the once, but hopefully people can read about an album and go, boy, that sounds like something I would like, and they look online and they can find a copy of it. That's, to me, that's the ultimate. To me, that's the ultimate. It's like it's spreading the word about these bands and getting other people involved. And I said this back when I did the Y&T book. Somebody in one of the panels said, all people need to do is hear it, and they'll like it. So if people are inclined to melodic hard rock, there's really nothing not to like about Night Ranger. And the wonderful thing is that they're still out there. They're still out there on the road. They're 3/5 intact. They've got both their original lead singers, and they've got one of the original guitar players. And I saw them 2 years ago, and they sound great live. They're not a band where you see live clips of them and you go, oh boy, it's time to hang it up. Not at all. And they're still bringing it.
And not only are they still out there, you spoke of coincidences earlier, which I want to know what your coincidence with Triumph is other than the lyrical content. But how's this for a coincidence? Just last week, I got a note in my email that one of our local venues here, the Santa Barbara Bowl, announced a date in November of ZZ Top being supported by Night Ranger coming to town. And I was like, wow. Really good bill, and I've never seen Night Ranger. I've seen different members, but never seen Night Ranger as a whole. I'm like, look at this, and they're coming to town in November at the same time your book comes out. How's that for a coincidence?
Wow, boy, I would say you should really go. Which is interesting because Night Ranger opened for ZZ Top, I want to say, on the Eliminator tour.
That's another thing I was going to get into because, again, coincidences abound when you're in a genre of music like this. But I'm sure Night Ranger opened up a leg of Sammy's tour, his VOA tour. Oh, no, his 3-Lock Box tour.
Yeah.
His 3-Lock Box tour.
That's right, yeah. So that's why Sammy and Jesse Harms are thanked in the liner notes of the second Night Ranger album, Midnight Madness. You'll see their names in there. Yeah,
I read about that one. Apparently, Sammy let them use his rehearsal space when they were getting together. He knew those guys through Fitz and everything, so they've been friends for a long time. And I was going to ask you before, Night Ranger just came out, but for your other books, have any artists or anybody you covered in these other books gotten back to you with any feedback on your books so far?
Yes, to an extent. In the case of Y&T, I actually had the pleasure of speaking with John Nyman, their second guitar player, and Aaron Lee, their current bass player, and I actually had them both on Tim's Vinyl Confessions to talk about their recent solo material, and they both have copies of the book. Now, I eventually still want to try and get a copy to Dave Menichetti because he's the guy, right?
Sure.
That hasn't happened yet. But in the case of Kansas, it was extremely. I was extremely flattered because two fans had the book and lived in. I think I got this right. Lived in Topeka, Kansas, which is where Kerry Livgren, who's the founder of Kansas and wrote the bulk of the songs, still lives, and they presented him with a copy of this book, and he posted about it on his Facebook page, and that
great.
was so gratifying.
That's awesome.
And also, John Elephant, who briefly replaced Steve Walsh as vocalist in the early '80s, he answered some questions for me that are in the chapters on the 2 albums that he did with them. And then their current keyboard player, a guy named Tom Brislin, who's played with a ton of different people. He was, he's played with Yes, he's played with Meat Loaf, he's played with a ton of people. But I actually had him on and interviewed him, and he's got a copy of the book. In the case of Sammy, the only connection I've made there is I did send a copy of it to Bill Church, because I ordered his excellent book.
I loved his book.
Martin Popoff was involved with.
Love that book.
And that was a great read. And so I sent him a copy of the Sammy book and chatted with him very, very briefly online. So the Night Ranger thing, yes, because I do know someone that works within the Night Ranger camp. So they're supposed to be getting copies of this book.
Cool.
Delivered to them. So. Yeah,
they got to be flattered. I would imagine, like you said, I'm sure there hasn't been a book written by them.
I would hope so. I mean, it's very. I make it very clear in the beginning of the book. It's not an official publication, and nor does it. None of these books are, right. These are just that people write books about bands all the time. But yeah, no, it's really gratifying to know that people appreciate the fact that somebody took the time to. Write a book.
Yeah.
You're not going to get rich doing this. There's no. It's
niche.
Very rewarding.
Niche.
It's very niche, but it's very rewarding in its own way. And did you want to talk about the Triumph connection?
Yeah. What's the Triumph connection?
Okay, so this was a really, I don't know if serendipity is the right word, but it was just really cool because I had written the album questions out quite a few months before. That's the first thing I do, and then I start looking for people to answer those questions, panelists to get involved. And in 2011, Night Ranger put out an album called Somewhere in California, which a lot of fans, and myself included, consider that to be a really strong return to form. It's a fantastic album that would fit in right alongside any of their 80s albums. I think it's a fantastic album. If they'd never broken up in the late 80s and Damn Yankees had never happened, this could have been the next album that they put out. Like, it's that good. And there's a song on that album called Follow Your Heart. And when I was writing the question about the song, I said, no, this isn't a Triumph cover, although that might be cool.
Yeah. And
I went on with the rest of the question, and I didn't think anything more of it. I'm just like, oh, look at that. It's same song title. They share a song title. Lots of bands have written songs with, similar song titles, right? Well, and then I find out a few months later that there is a Triumph tribute album. It's actually only been out a few weeks now as we're talking, called Magic Power.
Yep.
And lo and behold, amongst many great artists that are on this, Jack Blades is on that album, and of all the songs that he could have done, he covers Follow Your Heart.
Wow.
So I had to go back and make mention of that because I'm like, that is too weird.
That is very coincidental.
I can't let that, because here he is doing a cover of it, so that means he sang on 2 completely different songs with the same title. I just thought that was, that was meant to be then, wasn't it?
That is fun. It's one of my favorite Triumph songs, too. I love the album that it's off of, too.
Me too. It's my favorite Triumph album, too, is the Thunder 7 record. And
same with me.
I highly recommend that tribute album. It's got Dean Castronovo, it's got Sebastian Bach. It's got a lot of cool people.
Oh, yeah, I played a couple songs from it, and Gil actually did a nice ID for my show. I go back with Triumph.
Oh, very cool. I've been a long time fan of those guys, too. I mean,
I love their documentary. I'm sure you saw it, right?
Documentary and all the.
Wasn't that great, that documentary?
Oh, yeah.
I love that. You mentioned the Y&T. They played a small venue in our town in Ventura last year, which was amazing to see them in a 500-seat place. Sounded terrific.
It's a band that never. I mean, I'm up here in Eastern Canada, so there are certain bands that just don't make it up here. You got to go where the fans are, and I get it. You don't want to. You have to go where the fans are. You got to go where you're going to make your money, and I understand that.
I was going to extend an invitation to you because they were here last year, and they're coming back the end of this year to the same venue in Ventura, California. So if you want to take a trip to beautiful sunny California when it's starting to get cold in Canada, you might be able to present Dave with one of your books. I'm very psyched he's coming back.
I would love that. I would love that. I don't think it's feasible, but I love the idea. Yeah, it's you know, I mean, I'm on the border of Maine, so if people, you know, if bands come up as far as Portland or Bangor, I can swing that. But really the only time I saw Night Ranger too was a couple of years ago, and actually there's a picture in the beginning of the book of me with the band because they did a meet and greet, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But they played in Guilford, New Hampshire as part of the Bret Michaels Party Gras tour.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a headline gig for them, but I still got to see Night Ranger. That was a bucket list band for me, and they sounded so good. So I guess maybe, you know, I had started doing books by then, but if the germ of the idea hadn't already been in the back of my brain somewhere, that would have solidified. It's like, you know, these guys are fantastic. I got to write a book.
Yeah, I think the only time I saw one of the members of Night Ranger was Brad Gillis. Up until last year, I had been to every Ronnie Montrose tribute show. I don't know if you're aware of them, but they've been doing them every year since 2016, I think, out in Orange County, California, around the NAMM convention. And there's always a who's who of musicians, 3 hours of the whole Ronnie Montrose career, and I always try to get to those. And one of them Brad was at. And he stole the show. Absolutely amazing. You know, he was on for a couple Montrose songs, and he did a Gamma song with an amazing solo. And just seeing him in a small place, you know, I was about 5 feet away from him. I mean, this Brad Gillis has got to be one of the most underrated guitarists out there. The guy's incredible.
I think so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, you know,
people in the know know how good he is.
Yeah,
but he should be a bigger name.
And you know, and it makes sense. He spent his career in Night Ranger, which again, for most of the public, if they're aware of them, they know the couple pop singles. They don't think of them as a guitar shredding band. But you know, both him and Jeff Watson, as you describe in the book very accurately, are absolutely incredible guitarists. But you don't think of them that way unless you see them. So let's just get deep into Night Ranger for the last segment of our talk here. Right off the bat, what's kind of like what you would tell somebody that really only knows Night Ranger from Sister Christian, maybe a couple other singles? Like, what would you want them to know about them, you know, just right off the bat that they probably aren't aware of?
Well, you know, the original greatest hits that came out in 1989, that's as good a place to start as anything, because it's just great song after great song after great song. But if you're interested in checking out their albums, and you want to hear something that, you know, you've never heard before, there's two albums that immediately come to mind. One is the album Man in Motion that came out in 1988. It was their last album on MCA.
Yeah.
It did not perform very well. It was not promoted. It's the most guitar-heavy of the first 5 albums. Not a lot of keyboards on it. And it's fantastic. In many ways, a lot of the songs on there wouldn't sound out of place on the first Damn Yankees album, because we're only talking a difference of a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So that's a great album that not enough people know about. Like, diehard fans know it quite well, but like it's not one that's readily available.
You know, I'm a perfect example, because I never had that album. I don't even know if I know any songs from it. But I was assuming that it would have been even more keyboard heavy. You know, I think the last thing I had heard from them back in the day around that time was The Secret of My Success from the Michael J. Fox movie, which was very heavy synth, very 80s sounding. Right,
and the album that song was also on that year was called Big Life, and I like the album a lot, but it is very keyboardy. And it's very much a pop rock album, whereas Man in Motion is primarily guitar driven, and you know, it's Brad and Jeff just, you know, never overplaying, always serving the song, but so many cool guitar licks. And then the other one I already talked about was the Somewhere in California from 2011. If anybody only knows the MCA albums, I would say Somewhere in California would, yes. Like, as a matter of fact, I say this, and I think I say this in the book, but, you know, when you're trying to recommend albums from a veteran band that's been around for a long time, chances are you're not going to recommend something latter day. You know what I mean?
Usually.
But in this case, I would have no problem recommending Somewhere in California if they've never heard Night Ranger before at all.
Cool.
And say, this is what Night Ranger sounds like at their best.
Nice.
That's how good it is. It's not just, that's pretty good for a latter-day album. It's, that's pretty good.
Nice.
Period.
So the listeners know I'm not putting Tim on the spot here. I did pre-warn him I was going to ask this, and I'm very curious. I asked him to list his top 10 favorite Night Ranger songs. Obviously, just personal opinion, and this might give us some things to look into as well. Would you mind doing that from 10 to 1, your favorite Night Ranger songs?
Yeah, it just so happens that I was on another show last week, and I was asked to do the same thing, so I have got the list handy.
Excellent. That's
because
great.
It was hard. It was hard to come up with a list. It really was, because there are so many highlights.
Yep.
But here we go. So number 10 is a song. Wait a minute. I'm make sure I counted this right. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, okay. Number 10 is actually a song from another more recent album from 2017 called Don't Let Up. That's the name of the album, and the song's called Running Out of Time. And that is quintessential Night Ranger.
Okay.
There's something about that song that it's an example of a newer song by a veteran band, or we call them heritage acts now, I guess, that perfectly captures the essence of what you loved about the band in the first place without just sounding like a rewrite of an earlier song. It's its own thing, but you listen to it and you go, that's Night Ranger. That's my Night Ranger right there.
Okay.
It's so good. The next one is, any given day, a lot of these could switch around.
Sure.
Next one is the song that gave the book its title, Sing Me Away.
Okay.
This was a single for them. I think it was their second single back in 1982 from their debut album, Dawn Patrol. And this is a great example of how they can start off. The song starts off with like Alan Fitzgerald keyboard note, and then it kicks in with a cool guitar riff. It slows. It doesn't slow up, but it backs off a little bit for the verses. And by the time you get to the chorus, it's just complete, total melody. Very accessible. And then it goes right back into the hard rocking riff, and it doesn't sound jarring. They can do that so well. They can transition between a heavy guitar part and a really melodic. When I say pop, I don't mean that in an insulting way. Just a really catchy melody. So I think that's a good example of is what they're really good at, is Sing Me Away.
And since it's the title of your book, so I was expecting that to be in your top 10. So that makes sense.
Well, also, you're looking for titles. You're trying to find a song title that has some sort of meaning there, and something to do with music or whatever. Sing Me Away.
It works perfectly.
Like a logical. Yeah, I at one point it's funny. You mentioned the song. I was almost going to call it, Secrets of Success or something like that, but I thought, no, that's too. Anyway, you go through this process. You're like, what are we going to call this, or what? The next one, I guess, number 8 is, this was a single too. It's from one of my favorite albums of theirs, 7 Wishes from '85, 4 in the Morning.
That's one of my favorites. I think this is
another good example of Jack Blades just being able to effortlessly, or he makes it sound easy, write a great pop rock song. Again, instantly hooky. Every part of the song is a hook, and it was a number 19 hit, but I think it should have done better.
And as a kid, I'll tell you, that was probably, that and Sister Christian were the two songs I heard the most on the radio when I was growing up. 4 in the Morning, I remember, was on the station I listened to, top 100 or top 94 songs of 1985. It got some good airplay on there. I always liked that song a lot too.
Cool. Next one, we're going back to the first album, Dawn Patrol, for a song called Call My Name, which is a ballad, but it's not your typical love ballad. It's dark, it's moody, and it's a good example, too, of one of the things I like about the band is that, like, Jack Blades writes the majority of the lyrics. He writes a lot of the songs, but he writes the majority of the lyrics, and he tells stories. He's a great storyteller, and this is a great example. It just puts you right into this deteriorating relationship. It's a fantastic song. Let's see, number 6 is from the second album, Midnight Madness. To my knowledge, it was never a single, though I think it could have been. A song called Passion Play. And in the book, I describe this song as drenched in melody. Every single part of this song is a hook. I don't know how anybody that likes this kind of music could resist it. It's so good.
Okay.
You can listen to it for blazing guitar solos. You can listen to it for overall song construction. You can listen to it for vocal harmonies. There's something for everyone in this song. And so my number 5, this is quite high, and again, this is from somewhere in California. It's a song called Time of Our Lives, which is a ballad, and it's a power ballad in the classic tradition. Night Ranger excel at these types of songs, and Kelly Kagi, the drummer, tends to sing the slower songs, and he's got this great soulful voice. And this song, had it come out in the mid-'80s, could have been a top 10 single. It's fantastic. It's got everything that you want in this type of song. It's a lighter raising song or a phone raising song, and it's very rare that a band that's been around a long time can write a ballad that has that same emotional punch as their earlier stuff. Most of the time, in the back of my mind, I always think, okay, guys, I want to hear new music. Don't bother writing any more ballads.
Yeah.
You can't better what you've already done. This one is an equal. This one stands right up against any other ballads from the 80s.
Okay.
Like I said, would have been a hit in another time. Number 4 is a song that you kicked things off with, Rumors in the Air.
Nice.
It's one of my favorites. It was a mainstream rock hit, but it was never officially released as a single, and I don't know why MCA only ever went 3 singles deep from them per album, because they could have milked those albums for more. It's a great song, too. It's got that great intro that sounds like it's keyboards, but it's actually Brad and Jeff doing like echo swells on the guitar, and again, it tells a story. It's super catchy, super compelling, and I think it's one of those songs they always do in concert. So,
it's definitely one of my favorites. That's why I played it. And honestly, that's one of the things I learned in your book. I had no idea that wasn't keyboard either until I read in your book, along with some of the other panelists there.
Yeah, it's one of those things like, if people are, with Van Halen, if you think about Cathedral from Diver Down.
Exactly.
It doesn't sound like it's kind of the same idea, what they're doing with the volume, volume pedal or volume switch. So you don't hear the initial attack on the guitar, you just hear the notes. And but they're doing it faster, and they're doing it in harmony. Like it's just really, it's mind-blowing. The next one is a song from the Man in Motion album that I already talked about from '88, a song called Reason to Be, which starts out like you'd think it's going to be an acoustic ballad, but it kicks in, and it's got more of those, the title kind of sums up Reason to Be. It's one of those positivity songs. One of those first thing in the morning you hear that, and you're like, you know what, I think it's going to be all right. It was a minor mainstream rock hit, but by then, that album didn't sell. But it's a fantastic song, and more people need to know about it. More people need to know about that album. So we get up to the top 2, and this is where it gets really difficult for me, because I think both of these songs are as good as it gets. But I'm going to go with Sentimental Street for number 2.
Interesting. Okay.
Probably the 3rd song I ever heard by them. It was a top 10 single in the U.S. when I think it peaked at number 8, so it was a big song. And I think in the book I say if aliens came to Earth and say, give me an example of melodic hard rock from the 80s, I'd play them that song. Like it just doesn't get any better.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite Brad Gillis guitar solos. I just think it's a fantastic song. It's a little mini symphony that Jack wrote there. And for my number 1, I got to go back where it all started. Don't Tell Me You Love Me. Very first song, very first single.
Nice.
It's one of my favorite songs of all time by anybody. I call it a melodic rock thrill ride from start to finish. There's just something about the combination of the way it starts with the clean guitars mixed with the heavy riffing. It's got the best Brad Gillis switching to Jeff Watson guitar solo. The chorus is super catchy. It rocks. It's a fantastic song. And I don't think you can go wrong with any of those. But I could do another top 10 right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I loved
a lot of.
I was going to say, I love your top 10 because you had a bunch, some songs that people know, most people would know, and obviously the later ones that people don't. I find it really interesting, the ones that not in your top 10, which again, I know it's really tough, but very, glaringly not there, were 2 of their biggest hits. Obviously, number 1, Sister Christian, and When You Close Your Eyes is usually a favorite, and You Can Still Rock in America.
Well, those are great.
It's interesting.
Yeah, no, and those are great. Those are fantastic. And Sister Christian is an example of if that's the only song that you hear on the radio by Night Ranger, I'm like, well, at least you're hearing Night Ranger on the radio. Most bands don't even have that one magnificent hit that everybody knows.
Sure.
And it's a great song. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I wanted to concentrate on some other songs that,
Yeah.
So it's not as if I was like, well, like Sister Christian is never a song that I would skip as many times as I've heard it. It's the first song I ever heard by them. And I just wanted to know more and more about the band. And You Can Still Rock in America is the second song I heard by them. And I mentioned both of those things in my introduction, it's so weird how some songs you can remember where you were when you first heard them, even though I wasn't, like I said, I was 9 years old. So I wasn't very old, but I knew what I liked in that sort of, it wasn't heavy metal. There was nothing scary about it, but yet it had electric guitars and it was catchy. And, yeah, those are great songs. And When You Close Your Eyes is a funny one because there's nothing funny about the song, but I never heard it until I got the greatest hits in '89. So it's kind of late actually buying their albums, but I don't ever remember hearing that on the radio.
I definitely heard that one on the
and
radio.
I know it was
yeah, that definitely got some play. And for me, I agree with you. My favorite song is
Well,
Don't
it hit
Say
number
Love Me.
14 on Billboard. It was a big song. I just don't ever remember hearing it. And the other thing is that, and I make mention of this too, so I'm up here in Eastern Canada, and Night Ranger was never a band that played in Canada a lot. And if you don't play up here, you don't get it's just, people don't, unless you're a superstar, people tend to pay more attention if you come up here every once in a while.
Sure.
Even a band like, Journey, but, they were big, but they were big everywhere. But even a band like Survivor, didn't come up here that much. So subsequently, the songs, if you look at the way these songs charted in the States, it's very different than the way they charted in Canada. Although I will say, Sister Christian peaked at number 5 on Billboard, which is, hey, it peaked at number 5. That's great. It actually went all the way to number 1 up here.
That's interesting.
For one second, we got it right.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. There's always been regional things. And plus, back then, in the early, mid-'80s, MTV was huge, and, your Much Music up there. I mean, that's Sister Christian was on 24/7 on MTV.
So, you had
mostly.
MTV 3 years, but that's right. That had a lot to do with it. MTV came on the air in 81. Much Music came on the air in 84. I didn't get Much Music where I lived until 86. I do remember seeing Night Ranger videos on Much Music, but not a lot. And there were certain, Don't Tell Me, a lot of people will talk about how they saw Don't Tell Me You Love Me, and they talk about seeing that video all the time on MTV. I never saw that video until the advent of YouTube.
Yeah. It makes sense. And honestly, that's the same experience as me. That's the first song I ever heard from Night Ranger, just on my local rock station. And I liked it. I wasn't running out to buy the tape. Again, I was really young. I wasn't buying a ton of stuff then, but definitely made an impression that I really liked them. And then, the next thing I heard from them was Sister Christian, and, those are the videos pretty much. I saw them on MTV more than I heard them on the radio. But yeah, that was my intro to them. Well, this has been great, Tim. I really thank you for, writing this book. This is very enjoyable and informative, like your other books I've read. I mean, really, for anybody out there that even has a slight interest in Night Ranger, and, they know the popular songs and want to know more about them, this is the book to look at, because you cover it all with your panel on there. Every song, every album, a lot of interesting information and stuff to pique your interest if you want to listen more, which I'm going to be. Man in Motion, I think, is my number one stop from your recommendation to check that album out.
Oh, it's so awesome to hear that, because that's the idea. This is a roadmap, and like the other books, I think that it's important to have it all in one place. I mean, with the internet, all the information is there, but sometimes it's hard to know where to go or where to start. And Wikipedia doesn't always have everything like it should be. So this is how I'd like to see it laid out if I was to, I always say I write the types of books that I myself would like to read. And this has come out the way that I would like. Okay, well, here's the albums, here's when they came out, here's all the songs, and reading through the questions and everybody's answers, I think kind of gives you an idea of what sort of album each one is. And which ones you might find yourself gravitating towards more than others.
So let me ask you, do you have little ideas in your head for your next book? You said it sounds like you want to do these routinely, so do you have a couple ideas bouncing in your head for the next one?
I've got 3 books that are in various states of work.
Oh, you've started them already. Wow, great. So obviously more to come.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thanks again, Tim, for joining me. It's always a pleasure. And just tell the people again, I guess, what's the best place to go to find out about everything? Your Instagram account, or where would you send people to learn about all your different things?
If people want to, my Instagram, I post daily on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. It's the same content, but if they want to see the videos, it's YouTube. And if you hit timsvinylconfessions.com, that takes you right to my YouTube account. All my books are available for Amazon wherever you live, whether it's the UK or whatever. Just type in my name, and Tim Durling, Night Ranger, and it'll come right up.
Perfect.
So that's the easiest thing.
Great. Well, thanks again, Tim. Have a great evening all the way east of me in that other time zone. I'm never even aware. It's 4 hours away rather than the 3 for Eastern time zone. And again, thanks for joining us, and have a great evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thank you very much.
Okay, take care.